Many top-secret projects were rushed into hundreds of tunnels scattered across Europe. The location and true purpose of many of these tunnels is still a mystery today, may hold fresh clues for a team determined to find answers.
Buried beneath a quiet Polish landscape lies a 20-mile Nazi tunnel network, the Międzyrzeecz Fortified Region. Recently opened, its vast, chilling engineering has stunned historians.
What is it? Be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful.
But what did they actually find inside that's so terrifying? The answer isn't a hidden weapon, but something far more profound. This hidden world reveals a shocking legacy
Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh my God. What is this, Mike?
of ambition and suffering, and an unexpected rebirth that no one could have foreseen. For decades, the true scale of the Międzyrzeecz Fortified Region has been a puzzle, a dark secret, slowly giving up its pieces. Historians and archaeologists have long known about the tunnels, but it is a constant process of rediscovery. The recent work to formally secure and document the complex ahead of its new public role has been like opening a time capsule. In cleaning out a long flooded section, conservators didn't find weapons or treasure, but something perhaps more telling: a perfectly preserved, rusted food can from a soldier's last meal, left exactly as it was in 1945. In another chamber, a faded schematic for a ventilation filter was found pasted to a wall, a silent testament to the daily life of the men stationed there. These are the small, chilling discoveries that remind us this place is not just a monument, but a crime scene, frozen in time, still reluctant to reveal all its secrets. This slow, careful uncovering has paved the way for a much larger revelation. While the tunnels have been known to specialists and brave urban explorers for years, their official management as a major public historical site, and the immense global media attention building towards its October 2025 public opening has changed everything. This is not merely about cutting a ribbon on a new tourist attraction. It represents a profound shift, a collective, modern-day confrontation with a terrifying legacy. It is our generation, 3/4 of a century later, finally stepping into the darkness and deciding what we can learn from it. The world is now, officially, shining a light into this abyss. To even begin to understand this place, you must first grapple with its many names. Each one tells a different part of the story. Its official German title was a formidable mouthful: the Festungsfront Oder-Warta-Bogen, the fortified front of the Oder-Warta Bend. It was designed to be imposing, even on paper. To the military planners, it was simply the Ostwall, the East Wall, a name that evokes a grand, impenetrable barrier. Today, on the land where it actually lies, it is known by its Polish name, the Międzyrzecki Rejon Umocniony, or MRU. This grounds it in its present reality, a part of the Polish landscape and heritage. But the most revealing name came from the German soldiers who were forced to live and work within its cold, damp confines. They called it the Regenwurmlager, the earthworm camp. This single word strips away any romantic idea of military glory. It replaces it with a much more honest and unsettling image: the reality of men reduced to a burrowing existence, living in the perpetual dark and mud, waiting for a storm they knew was coming. So, what is the full story of this earthworm camp? Let's descend into that 20-mile-long underground city, a place of terrifying scale and chillingly efficient engineering. To understand why the Ostwall exists, you have to look at a map. Imagine you're a German general in the 1930s. You're paranoid about an attack from the east, and your job is to protect the German heartland, and especially the capital, Berlin. Your eyes would naturally fall on a very specific geographical feature. To your north is the River Oder, and to your south, the River Water. Between them, the land rises to form a narrow, forested ridge. This is the Oder-Water Bend. It's a natural corridor, a direct motorway for any army marching west. And it became the absolute perfect place to build a wall. This wasn't just any defensive line. It was a key part of a much bigger, more terrifying idea: the creation of a fortress Europe. The Nazi regime wasn't just planning for a short war. They were building an empire, and they believed they needed permanent, imposing fortifications to guard its borders. The Ostwall was designed to be the locked eastern gate of that fortress, and the plans for this gate were absolutely staggering. The original vision, drawn up in the mid-1930s, was almost too ambitious to comprehend. The initial idea wasn't for just the 20 miles of tunnels we know today. The full plan was for a continuous defensive line stretching nearly 50 miles. 50 miles of concrete bunkers, tank traps, machine gun nests, and interconnected tunnels. The scale of the project was so vast that the construction was projected to continue all the way until 1951. This wasn't a quick fix. It was a generational project, a statement of intent carved into the landscape. It was designed to be the strongest, most technologically advanced defensive line the world had ever seen. But a blueprint is just a drawing. To turn that drawing into reality required an army of workers. And this is where the story turns from being merely ambitious to being truly dark. The regime didn't hire enough willing laborers for a project of this scale. They couldn't. So, they used a different kind of workforce: forced labor. The back-breaking work of digging foundations, mixing concrete, and laying railway tracks was done largely by prisoners of war and inmates from concentration camps. These men lived in brutal, squalid conditions nearby, worked to exhaustion, and many died right here, their lives poured into the concrete along with the gravel and sand. It's a crucial, horrifying part of the story. When we look at the immense engineering of the Ostwall, we cannot and must not separate it from the human cost. The sheer scale of the concrete is not just a measure of engineering ambition, it is a measure of human suffering. The walls themselves are a memorial to that brutality. To marvel at the construction without acknowledging the pain it cost is to miss the most important part of its history. And then, with typical Nazi inconsistency, the grand project suddenly lost its priority. By 1938, the wheels were in motion for a different kind of war. The strategy of the regime shifted dramatically. Why waste years and immense resources building a static wall when you could unleash the lightning-fast, aggressive tactics of blitzkrieg? The generals in power became obsessed with fast-moving tanks and dive bombers, not fixed fortifications. The focus swung from defending the eastern border to planning the invasions of countries like Poland and France in the west. Almost overnight, the Ostwall went from being a top-priority mega-project to a sideshow. Funding dried up. Manpower was diverted. The grand 50-mile vision was dramatically scaled back. Construction on most new sections ground to a halt. What was left was the central, most advanced part of the system, the part we now call the MRU, a fully realized underground city, but one that was essentially a colossal fragment of a much larger, abandoned dream. This shift in fortune frames the entire complex in a deep irony. The Ostwall became a white elephant. It was a monument to an initial mindset of defense, later deemed unimportant by a regime now drunk on the idea of unstoppable offense. The journey into the Ostwall begins with a descent. It's not a casual walk down a slope. It's a precise, almost ceremonial march down a steep, relentless staircase made of cold, grey concrete. With every step down, the daylight from the surface fades, replaced by the stark, artificial glow of electric lights. The air changes too. The fresh breeze of the Polish countryside vanishes, replaced by a constant damp chill that seems to seep right into your bones. It's the chill of the deep earth, a temperature that never changes, summer or winter. It's the feeling of being swallowed whole by the planet, leaving the world you know far behind. And then you reach the bottom, and that's when the true scale of the place hits you. You are standing in what they call the main gallery. It's not a tunnel in any ordinary sense. It's more like a subterranean highway, a vast arched corridor that stretches off into an impossible darkness in both directions. The numbers alone are difficult to grasp. This central network runs for 20 miles. It lies buried up to 40 meters deep. That's deeper than the height of a 13-story building. You could take the entire nave of a great cathedral and lower it into this space, and it would be completely submerged. This main tunnel is so wide, so deliberately engineered, that it had to serve as the underground backbone for an entire army. Standard gauge railway tracks are set into the floor, the same kind you'd see on any national railway line. They were used to move heavy artillery, supplies, and troops across vast distances without ever seeing the sun. Right alongside them, there was enough room for military trucks to drive side by side. This was not a cramped, claustrophobic burrow. It was a monumentally ambitious piece of logistics designed for efficiency on a terrifying scale. But the main tunnel is just the spine. Branching off from it is an entire subterranean city, built for a long and brutal siege. There were proper railway stations where trains could stop and unload. There were massive barracks rooms, designed to house thousands of soldiers who might be down here for weeks on end. There were fully equipped armories for storing weapons and sophisticated power stations to generate electricity. There were field hospitals ready to treat the wounded, and command centers where the generals would have directed the battle. This wasn't just a defensive position. It was a self-sufficient world, a place where an entire community could live and fight in complete isolation from the surface. Keeping this underground world alive required engineering that was cutting edge for its time. Sophisticated ventilation systems were bored up to the surface, providing a constant supply of fresh air and preventing the tunnels from filling with engine fumes. Deep wells were dug to tap into groundwater, ensuring a supply for drinking and cooling machinery. Most impressively, and most chillingly, the entire complex was built with absurdly thick, reinforced concrete. The ceilings and walls of key areas were designed to withstand a direct hit from the largest bombs in the world at that time. It was a shelter that was meant to be utterly indestructible. The sheer volume of material used is almost beyond comprehension. Just the central section we know today consumed over 2 million cubic feet of concrete. That's enough to pave a motorway for dozens of miles. But as we look at these cold, hard numbers, we must remember where this concrete came from and who mixed it, poured it, and shaped it. This incredible feat of engineering, this underground city of immense scale and strength, was built on the backs of the forced laborers we spoke of earlier. Every cubic meter of concrete represents their exhaustion, their pain, and for many, their lives. By January of 1945, the war had turned. The Nazi regime, which had once dreamed of a 1,000-year empire, was now crumbling on all fronts. In the east, a tidal wave of men and steel was gathering force. This was the Soviet Red Army's Vistula Oder offensive, one of the largest and most powerful military operations in human history. Millions of soldiers, supported by tens of thousands of tanks and artillery pieces, began their relentless push westwards. Their goal was simple and devastating: to drive straight to Berlin and end the war. And standing directly in their path was the Ostwall, the fortress that was built specifically for this moment. After nearly a decade of planning, and at a staggering cost of human life and national treasure, the earthworm camp was about to face its first and only real test. The German High Command had always believed that this fortified line could hold back an enemy for months, bleeding them dry in a brutal battle of attrition. It was designed to be an impassable barrier, a concrete shield that would protect the German heartland. The stage was set for an epic, horrific siege, but the siege never happened. Instead of a months-long struggle, the formidable fortress, with its miles of tunnels and state-of-the-art engineering, was broken by Soviet forces in just 3 days. The battle for the Ostwall was less a dramatic stand and more a swift, decisive collapse. How could this possibly have happened? The reasons are layered with a deep historical irony. Firstly, the complex was critically undermanned. The German army in 1945 was stretched impossibly thin, fighting a losing war on 2 fronts. There simply weren't enough soldiers to fully staff the dozens of bunkers and guard the endless tunnels. Secondly, and just as importantly, the fortress was incomplete. Many of its most powerful guns had never been installed. The grand, rotating turrets that were meant to dominate the battlefield were often just empty concrete husks. The vast underground city, built to supply an army of thousands, was populated by only a few hundred weary, often poorly equipped troops. The Soviet commanders, recognizing that the defenses were not as strong as they could have been, simply bypassed the strongest points and smashed through the weaker ones. The impenetrable wall was in the end porous. The fall of the Ostwall was not a glorious last stand. It was the moment the complex's primary purpose was revealed as a tragic, expensive failure. All that concrete, all that steel, all that suffering during its construction, it all amounted to a system that was ultimately useless. It was a white elephant of monumental proportions, a symbol of an empire that had overstretched itself and could no longer defend its own grand designs. When the Soviet soldiers finally entered the tunnel network, they did not find a desperate fighting enemy. They found a silent, abandoned city. The echoes of their footsteps would have bounced off the cold, concrete walls of the empty barracks and the deserted railway stations. The power was likely out, the air damp and still. They explored a ghost town, a monument to Nazi ambition that had been rendered obsolete by the very nature of the war the regime had chosen to fight. The Soviets had not so much conquered the fortress as they had walked into its empty shell, the ultimate symbol of a defeated ideology. The mighty Ostwall, a project conceived in arrogance, had fallen with a whimper, not a bang. After the war, the Ostwall fell into a deep silence. For decades, it was simply a forgotten relic. The massive steel doors were sealed, and the tunnels were left to the dripping water and the encroaching damp. To the people living on the surface, it became a ghost story, a dark spot on the map, a dangerous place best avoided. It was as if the earth had simply swallowed the entire complex whole, and everyone was happy to pretend it had never existed. The Grand Nazi project was left to rot in obscurity, a fitting end for a symbol of such profound failure. But darkness and silence rarely last forever. In the 1980s, something unexpected began to stir deep within the tunnels. a new kind of inhabitants found their way inside. They were not soldiers. They were young Poles living under the grip of a communist government they felt disconnected from. They became known as the Bunker People. To them, this forbidden underground world was not a haunted tomb. It was the ultimate place of freedom. Defying the authorities and ignoring the very real dangers, they took over the tunnels. They cut through the old locks and ventured deep into the heart of the complex, carrying with them generators, music, and a fierce desire for a space to call their own. What they created down there in the darkness was a truly anarchic community. They hosted secret raves, the sound of punk and electronic music echoing through corridors that were once meant for marching soldiers. They held art exhibitions and theater performances, their creations illuminated by flickering lights in the cavernous halls. For a short time, this place of brutal order and control became a center for chaotic, joyful, and rebellious expression. It was, of course, incredibly dangerous. The tunnels were unstable in places, the darkness was absolute if your torch failed, and the air could grow thin. Tragically, accidents did happen, and lives were lost, adding a new layer of sorrow to the complex's long history. The most lasting legacy of the Bunker People isn't just the stories of their parties, it's the art they left behind. The concrete walls, once sterile and military, are now covered in a vibrant explosion of graffiti. To call this vandalism is to miss the point entirely. This was a reclamation. It was a human response to a deeply inhuman space. The soldiers' nicknames and military stencils were joined by declarations of love, anarchist symbols, surreal cartoon creatures, and punk rock lyrics. A wall in a barracks might be adorned with a colorful, dreamlike painting of a forest, a stark contrast to its grim surroundings. This graffiti is the soul of the modern tunnels. It represents life, messy and unpredictable, pushing its way back into a place that was designed for death and order. It is the polar opposite of the Nazi aesthetic, and that is precisely what makes it so powerful. And then, there are the current residents, the ones who moved in without asking anyone's permission and have now become the bunker's most important guardians, the bats. As human activity became more managed, the bats moved in by the thousands. The tunnels, with their constant cool temperature and perfect stillness, provide an ideal hibernation site. Today, the Ostwall is one of Europe's most important bat sanctuaries, a designated protected area for these fragile creatures. Every winter, nearly 40,000 bats from 12 different species settle in the tunnels, hanging from the ceilings in dense, furry clusters. This is the final, and perhaps most beautiful, paradox of the earthworm camp. A place that was conceived as a fortress for destruction, a project that consumed human lives in its construction and was designed to take more in its operation, has become a sanctuary. It is now a protected haven for delicate life. The very darkness that was meant to hide an army now protects a vital ecosystem. The tunnels that were built to withstand the world's most powerful bombs are now a fragile environment safeguarded for tiny, winged mammals. The Ostwall's story is no longer just one of war and failure. It is a story of rebellion, of art, and of nature's stubborn, incredible ability to heal, even in the most unlikely and stained of places. Today, the Ostwall has found its latest identity as the Międzyrzeecz Fortified Region Museum. It has become a prime destination for what we now call dark tourism, the act of traveling to places associated with death and historical tragedy. People from all over the world now make the journey to walk its tunnels, not as soldiers or rebels, but as visitors, trying to understand what happened here. What often strikes visitors is the overwhelming evidence of what a regime, armed with a destructive ideology and a ruthless disregard for human life, is capable of building. The terror is in the cold, hard reality of the concrete. It is in the efficiency of the railway lines laid for war and the chilling purpose behind the barracks built for a long siege. The bunker is a blueprint of a monstrous mindset, made real in steel and concrete. This leaves us with a monument to profound contradiction. The Ostwall is a Nazi mega-project that became a Soviet prize. It is a sterile military complex that became a vibrant canvas for rebel art. It is a place of death that has become a sanctuary for life. It is all these things at once. It is a permanent scar on the landscape, and like any deep scar, it tells a story of pain, of healing, and of a wound that should not be forgotten. The journey ends as visitors ascend back to the surface, emerging from the constant chill into the warmth of the sun, from the echoes of the past into the sounds of the present. They carry with them the weight of this place. The ultimate lesson of the Ostwall is not about the glory of engineering, but about the fragility of peace and the constant need to guard against the kind of ambition that would build such a thing.